In a small, quiet town, there lived an elderly woman known to everyone simply as Grandma. Her real name was hardly ever used because she had a warmth about her that made everyone feel like they knew her well. She had lived in the same little house for decades, a house that smelled faintly of old wood and music. Her life was simple, filled with small routines, tending to her little garden, walking down the cobbled streets to greet neighbors, and most importantly, spending hours at her beloved piano. Music had always been her closest companion. It was not just a hobby or a pastime, but a lifeline, a friend who never judged her and always listened. She could sit for hours, letting her fingers dance across the keys, playing pieces that were full of emotion, even if no one else was listening. Grandma had lived through many hardships, as most people of her age had. She had seen friends leave the town, family members move far away, and the world around her change rapidly. But through it all, music remained her anchor. Her piano, an old but well-cared-for instrument, had been with her for over 50 years. It was scratched and slightly faded, but it had a sound that was warm and full of life. To her, it was not just wood and strings. It was a keeper of memories, a witness to her joys, her sorrows, and her quiet moments of triumph. One sunny afternoon, word spread through the town that a famous orchestra conductor was visiting. He was known for his sharp eye and critical ear, having led many renowned symphonies across the world. People whispered that he was searching for new talent, and anyone who played the piano in town might get a chance to be heard by him. The news created a mix of excitement and nervousness. For most, the idea of being evaluated by such a famous figure was intimidating, almost frightening. For Grandma, it was a shock she never expected to encounter at her age. The townspeople, knowing her talent and the years she had devoted to music, encouraged her to play for the conductor. "You should go, Grandma. He needs to hear what real music feels like," said one neighbor. Another added, "It doesn't matter how old you are. You have something that no one else here can give him." Grandma smiled politely but shook her head. She was used to her music being private, a secret shared only with herself and the memories of her past. The idea of performing in front of a famous conductor in a room full of strangers made her heart race nervously. Her granddaughter, who had always admired her music, was more persistent. "Grandma, please. You have to do this. Everyone deserves to hear what you can do. You've spent your whole life playing, and now it's time for others to experience it." The granddaughter's excitement was contagious. She knew how much music meant to her grandmother, and had often watched in awe as Grandma played late into the night. Finally, after hours of gentle persuasion, Grandma agreed. She would play for the conductor, but she did so quietly, with humility and a touch of doubt. On the day of the audition, the grand hall where the conductor was waiting felt overwhelming. It was a space filled with polished wood and shining lights, a stark contrast to the cozy simplicity of Grandma's home. The piano on stage was magnificent but unfamiliar. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, feeling the weight of anticipation pressing down. The audience filled the seats, their eyes filled with curiosity and expectation. She felt a small pang of nervousness, but also a strange excitement. This was a moment she never thought she would experience, and yet here she was, ready to play. When the conductor entered, he was immediately noticeable. He carried himself with confidence, a slight smirk playing on his lips as he surveyed the hall. His gaze fell on Grandma, and he chuckled quietly to himself. She was elderly, fragile-looking, and he seemed certain that she could not impress him. The audience noticed his laughter and exchanged quiet whispers. But Grandma did not falter. She reminded herself that music was not about appearances, it was about feeling, and she had plenty of feeling to give. She approached the piano and sat down on the bench, her hands resting lightly on the keys. The room felt larger than life, and for a moment she closed her eyes to steady her breathing. Then slowly she began to play. At first it was simple, a melody that was soft and unassuming, but there was a grace in every note. The conductor's laughter grew louder, a sound meant to belittle, but Grandma did not notice. Her focus was entirely on the music. Each note carried a memory, a moment from her life, though subtle enough that no one else could recognize it yet. As she continued, the music began to change, evolving into something richer and more complex. Her fingers moved with precision and emotion, drawing sounds that seemed to fill the hall with warmth. The audience began to notice, their initial curiosity giving way to quiet admiration. Something about her playing was different, It was not flashy or modern, but it had an authenticity that could not be taught. The conductor's smirk faltered, replaced by a frown of concentration. He had expected something ordinary, something he could dismiss easily. Instead, he was hearing depth, history, and a lifetime of experience in each note. Grandma's hands seemed to have a life of their own. She played a piece she had composed years ago, a simple but heartfelt composition inspired by her youth, her joys, and her sorrows. The melody was gentle but full of passion. Every person in the hall felt the emotion in her music, and the conductor, who had entered with skepticism and amusement, began to sense something unexpected. The music was not just notes. It was a story, a lifetime of experiences woven into sound. The atmosphere in the hall shifted. The audience sat forward in their seats, captivated by the story unfolding through her fingers. Even those who had come simply to see a quaint, elderly woman play were now silent, lost in the music. The conductor, who had laughed moments before, now found himself leaning closer, listening intently, his amusement fading. He realized that he had judged her too quickly. There was a power in her music, a sincerity and depth that few had ever achieved. For Grandma, the audience and the conductor's reactions were almost irrelevant. She played because she had to, because music was part of her being. But as the conductor's expression changed from ridicule to something more attentive, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She was sharing not just her skill but her heart, and that was all that mattered. Each note she played was a piece of her life, a story only music could tell. And now, finally, someone was truly listening. By the time she finished, the hall was filled with a silence that spoke louder than any words. The conductor, who had entered the room laughing, sat in shock, unsure of how to respond. The music had caught him off guard, pierced through his assumptions, and touched something deep inside him. Grandma simply sat there, hands resting gently on the keys, a soft smile on her face. She had shared her story, her music, her life, and in that moment it did not matter what anyone thought. The notes she had played had found their mark, and that was enough. Outside, the townspeople waited, wondering how it had gone. Grandma emerged from the hall, her posture modest but her eyes bright. She had faced the fear, played with honesty, and left an impression that no one, not even the conductor, could deny. And though she did not know it yet, this small act of courage and devotion would ripple outward, changing the way people saw her and the power of music itself. The journey had begun, and what seemed like a simple audition would soon become a story that no one would forget. After Grandma had finished her first melody, the room felt almost sacred. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken admiration and surprise. The conductor, a man who had led world-renowned orchestras and heard countless pianists, had never encountered anything like this. His laughter, which had once filled the hall with condescension, had vanished entirely. Instead, there was a tense stillness, as if the music had caught him in a trap he didn't know existed. He had expected mediocrity, a quaint performance to humor the audience, and now he faced a reality he hadn't anticipated. The audience remained quiet, as though moving even a finger might disrupt the spell. The notes Grandma had played lingered in the air, echoing softly in the hall. They were not simply sounds. They were emotions, carefully crafted and steeped in years of life experience. People could feel the small joys, the moments of loss, and the quiet triumphs embedded in the melody. It was a performance born from a lifetime of living, and it resonated far deeper than technical skill alone ever could. The conductor, his eyes narrowing slightly, leaned forward, observing her hands as they rested gently on the keys. There was a grace in the way she held herself, a quiet confidence that was not loud or flashy but powerful in its own right. He noticed her fingers were not the strongest, yet each note was deliberate and precise. There was an honesty to her playing, an authenticity that no professional training could manufacture. For the first time in his career, he felt the weight of true emotion in a performance. Grandma, unaware of the conductor's scrutiny, allowed herself to sink deeper into the music. She began to play a different piece, one that she had composed in her youth but had rarely shared with anyone. It was a piece inspired by memories of family, friends who had moved away, and moments of quiet reflection by the window on rainy afternoons. The melody was soft at first, almost hesitant, but as she continued, it gained strength. Each note carried a story, a fragment of her life that words could never fully capture. The audience began to sense the change. They leaned forward, drawn by the depth of feeling pouring from the piano. Some closed their eyes, allowing the music to carry them into their own memories. Others watched in awe, unable to believe that such a performance could come from a petite elderly woman who seemed so unassuming. There was a collective realization that they were witnessing something rare, something transcendent, beyond skill or technique. This was pure lived experience translated into music. The conductor, still skeptical, tried to hide his surprise, but it was impossible. His posture stiffened and his hands, which had been folded casually, began to fidget. He had been trained to analyze and critique every aspect of a performance, the technical accuracy, the tempo, the dynamics. But here none of those conventional rules mattered. The music spoke in a language he had almost forgotten, a language that did not require judgment but only feeling. It unsettled him, challenged his assumptions, and reminded him of why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. Grandma's playing shifted seamlessly from one emotion to another. There were moments of tenderness, notes that seemed to float on air, delicate and soft. Then came passages of intensity, where her fingers struck the keys with a quiet force that resonated through the hall. The contrast was breathtaking, a journey that carried the listeners from calm reflection to deep emotion without a single word spoken. The conductor found himself unconsciously leaning in closer, drawn into the story unfolding beneath her fingers. He could feel memories surfacing, long-buried emotions that had been pushed aside in the pursuit of perfection and acclaim. He remembered his own beginnings, when music had been a source of comfort, joy, and expression, before the pressures of fame and expectation had made it a career defined by judgment and accolades. He felt a lump in his throat, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. This performance was stripping away the layers he had built around himself, revealing the part of him that had fallen in love with music for its emotional power, not its recognition. Grandma, still absorbed in her music, seemed to exist in a world separate from the hall, the conductor, and even the audience. Her eyes occasionally fluttered closed, and a gentle smile touched her lips as she lost herself in the rhythm and melody. She was not performing to impress or to compete. She was sharing a piece of her soul, something that had matured and grown over decades. The music was her voice, her way of communicating emotions that words could never capture, and in that moment it reached everyone present, connecting them in a silent understanding that transcended age, experience, and expectation. As the piece progressed, there was a subtle shift in the conductor's demeanor. The smirk he had worn, the laughter that had mocked her, was gone. He straightened in his seat, a look of awe replacing his earlier amusement. He could no longer analyze the performance through the lens of skill alone. The music demanded something deeper, acknowledgement of the life behind the notes, respect for the journey that had brought this woman to this very moment. He realized he had underestimated her, judged her by her age and appearance rather than listening with an open heart. The audience felt the same transformation. There were gasps of astonishment, quiet murmurs of admiration, and then gradually applause that began softly and grew louder with each passing second. People were clapping not out of obligation, but out of genuine appreciation for the artistry and emotion they had witnessed. Some wiped away tears, moved by the authenticity of the performance. Others exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that this was a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. Grandma did not rush to finish. She allowed the music to breathe, to linger, giving space for each emotion to resonate fully. She transitioned into a final movement, one that was both reflective and triumphant. Her fingers moved with a delicate strength, coaxing the notes to life with a subtle power that seemed effortless. The melody rose and fell, a wave of emotion that carried the audience with it, leaving no one untouched. The conductor, completely absorbed, could feel the tears welling in his eyes. He had tried to maintain composure, to uphold the professional distance that his position demanded, but it was impossible. The music was too raw, too powerful, too honest. He had laughed at her, dismissed her talent before she even began, and now he was confronted with a truth he could not ignore. This woman, this grandmother, had something he had rarely encountered in his entire career: a genuine, unfiltered connection to music and emotion. As the final note faded into silence, the hall remained still for a moment, as if no one could bring themselves to break the spell. The conductor's hands shook slightly as he lowered them from his lap, unsure of what to say. The audience waited, their hearts full, sensing the gravity of the moment. Grandma's eyes opened, meeting the conductor's gaze for the first time during the performance. There was no arrogance, no pride, only quiet acknowledgement that she had shared a part of herself. The applause began then, slowly at first, and then with a rising intensity that filled the hall with sound. People cheered and clapped, moved by the performance and the story it told. The conductor, still overcome with emotion, joined in, his hands clapping hesitantly at first, then more vigorously as he tried to reconcile his surprise and admiration. He had come expecting a simple, unremarkable performance and instead had witnessed a masterclass in emotion, storytelling, and authenticity. Grandma stood, bowing slightly, acknowledging the audience without fanfare. She had not sought recognition, but it was clear that she had earned it. The performance was more than notes on a page. It was a testament to a life lived fully, to passion that had endured despite obstacles, and to the universal power of music to touch hearts across generations. After the performance, as the audience began to leave, many stopped to speak to Grandma, offering words of admiration and gratitude. They shared how her music had moved them, reminded them of loved ones, or brought back memories they had thought lost. She listened politely, smiling, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had not performed for accolades or fame, yet the recognition she received was a natural result of the honesty and heart she poured into her music. The conductor remained seated, absorbing the impact of what he had just witnessed. He had laughed, underestimated, and dismissed, and now he was humbled, reminded of the deep emotional power of music. He knew that he would never forget this performance and that it had changed him as both a conductor and a person. In the silence after the music, he felt a sense of connection he had not felt in years, a reminder of why he had devoted his life to music in the first place. Grandma, gathering her things and preparing to leave the hall, felt a quiet joy. She had faced her fears, played with honesty, and touched hearts in a way she had never imagined possible. The experience was not about the conductor or the audience. It was about the music itself and the emotions it could convey. And in that shared silence, in that fleeting moment of connection, she understood something profound. The true power of music lies not in technical mastery or fame, but in the courage to share one's soul. As she stepped out of the hall, the cool breeze of the afternoon brushing against her face, Grandma felt lighter, as if a burden she hadn't realized she carried had been lifted. She had taken a step into the unknown, and it had brought her not only recognition but also a reaffirmation of the joy and fulfillment that music had always provided. The town would talk about this day for years, but for her, the real reward was the experience itself, the courage, the connection, and the realization that age, appearance, or circumstance could never diminish the power of a sincere, heartfelt performance. Grandma returned home that evening, her heart still fluttering from the performance. The hall, the audience, and even the conductor's unexpected reaction played over in her mind like a melody she couldn't quite finish. Sitting in her quiet living room, she placed her hands on the familiar keys of her own piano. It felt different somehow, heavier with significance, as if the instrument understood what had just happened. She played softly, letting her emotions spill out in gentle waves, a private continuation of what had become the most important performance of her life. Word of her playing had spread quickly through the town. Neighbors stopped by, curious and eager to hear her thoughts. Some spoke with admiration, others with surprise, asking how it felt to have performed in front of someone so famous. Grandma responded with modesty, her voice calm and steady. She did not seek praise. She simply shared that she had played as she always did, with honesty and heart. But the townspeople could see it in her eyes. Something had shifted. Something important had happened that day. Meanwhile, the conductor could not get Grandma's performance out of his mind. He replayed it in his head over and over, each note vivid and precise, carrying emotions that words could never describe. He had always been critical, measured, and confident in his evaluations, yet he felt a sense of humility he rarely experienced. Here was a woman who had no formal recognition, no fame, no accolades, yet she had conveyed more feeling and lived experience in her music than many of his accomplished protégés. The realization unsettled him, and yet it was deeply moving. Determined to understand her talent more fully, the conductor decided to arrange another meeting. This time he invited her to a more formal setting, one where she could perform a longer set, explore different pieces, and perhaps reveal more of the depth he had glimpsed. Grandma was hesitant at first, She had played from the heart, not for evaluation, and the idea of performing under scrutiny again filled her with anxiety. Her granddaughter encouraged her gently, reminding her that the second performance would not be about proving herself, but about sharing more of the music she loved. Reluctantly, Grandma agreed. On the day of the second meeting, the setting was grander and more intimidating than before. The conductor's office was filled with instruments, sheet music, and awards that chronicled his career. He greeted her politely, but she noticed a difference in his demeanor. He was quieter, more thoughtful, and there was a hint of anticipation in his eyes. Grandma felt a flutter of nerves, but reminded herself that the music was her own, and that no external circumstances could change the bond she had with it. As she sat at the piano, she allowed her fingers to rest lightly on the keys. The conductor watched intently, his usual air of judgment replaced by genuine curiosity. This time, Grandma chose pieces that reflected the breadth of her experiences. Tender melodies from her youth, lively tunes that spoke of joy and laughter, and compositions that carried the weight of loss and reflection. Each piece was a window into her life, revealing emotions that had shaped her over decades. The music began softly, almost hesitantly, as if testing the waters of the room. The conductor leaned forward, attentive as Grandma's confidence grew with each note. The melodies were intricate yet heartfelt, displaying not only technical skill but an emotional resonance that was rare. He could feel the stories embedded in the music, stories of love, of struggle, of quiet victories. It was not merely a performance. It was a conversation between her life and everyone present, a shared experience that needed no words. With each passing piece, the conductor's admiration grew. He had expected to hear skill, but instead he was encountering wisdom and emotion. Grandma's hands moved gracefully, yet they were not perfect in the conventional sense. There were slight hesitations, subtle imperfections, but they added to the authenticity, giving each note a human quality that polished technique often lacked. He realized that music at its core was about connection, about conveying truth, and she was a master of that art. As the session progressed, Grandma began to play a piece she had never performed outside her home. It was a deeply personal composition, written during a time of profound change and reflection in her life. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, filled with longing and hope intertwined. She played with a quiet intensity, drawing every listener into her world. The conductor, who had maintained composure during much of the performance, could feel tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. He was overwhelmed by the honesty and emotion in her playing. The music was not just sound. It was a bridge across generations connecting the young and old, the seasoned musician and the listener. Each note seemed to speak directly to the heart, bypassing reason and judgment. The conductor realized that his previous assumptions about talent, age, and presentation had been shallow. Here was a woman who had lived a full life, whose experiences had infused her music with something far beyond technical ability. She had the rare gift of translating life itself into sound. Grandma noticed the conductor's reaction, a subtle change in his expression that revealed awe and respect. She did not alter her playing for him. She simply continued to express herself authentically. Yet she could sense the walls of skepticism he had built around himself beginning to crumble. The laughter, the smirks, the casual judgment, all had vanished, replaced by genuine engagement. Music had the power to do that, to break down barriers and touch even the most guarded hearts. As the performance reached its peak, the room was silent except for the piano. The notes hung in the air, heavy with meaning and emotion. The conductor felt a wave of reflection wash over him. He remembered his own beginnings when he had fallen in love with music for the pure joy of it. He thought of the moments he had lost along the way, buried under expectations and the pursuit of perfection. Grandma's music reminded him of the essence of why he had devoted his life to this art: connection, expression, and the ability to move hearts. Grandma's final piece was gentle yet resolute. It spoke of acceptance, of embracing life in all its complexity, and of finding peace in the simple act of creation. She played with a serenity that contrasted with the intensity of earlier pieces, leaving the listeners with a sense of completion, as if the music itself had guided them on a journey and safely brought them back. The conductor, overwhelmed with emotion, could only watch in silent admiration, understanding that he was witnessing something extraordinary. When the last note faded, there was a moment of profound silence. It was not awkward or tense, but filled with reverence. The conductor rose from his seat, taking a hesitant step forward and then another. He approached Grandma slowly, as if unsure how to express the feelings that her music had stirred within him. His voice, when he finally spoke, was soft but filled with sincerity. He told her that he had never experienced anything like this, that her music had touched him deeply, and that she had a gift that transcended age, experience, and expectation. Grandma listened quietly, nodding gently. She did not seek accolades or fame, yet she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had shared her life through music, and it had been received with understanding and respect. The conductor, visibly moved, continued to express his admiration, speaking of the layers of emotion, the storytelling, and the authenticity that defined her performance. For him, it was a revelation, a reminder of the true power of music to connect people and evoke deep, unspoken emotions. The session ended with a quiet acknowledgement of the shared experience. Grandma packed her sheet music, her heart full but calm. The conductor lingered, replaying the performance in his mind and feeling a newfound respect for the woman who had, in a few hours, changed his perspective on music and life. The connection forged that day was not just about piano or technique. It was about the universality of human emotion and the ability of music to bridge gaps between age, experience, and expectation. As Grandma walked back to her home, the afternoon sun casting warm light on the streets, she reflected on the journey she had taken. Each step felt lighter, as if the music had lifted a burden she hadn't realized she carried. She understood that her life, with all its simple joys and quiet struggles, had culminated in this moment of expression and recognition. It was a reminder that true artistry comes not from seeking approval, but from living fully and sharing one's experiences honestly. That evening, the town buzzed with news of her second performance. People spoke not only of the music itself, but of the transformation they had witnessed in the conductor. A man known for his sharp critique and occasional harshness had been moved to genuine admiration and emotional vulnerability. It was a testament to the power of authenticity, to the impact of a life lived in passion, and to the profound influence of music as a form of communication beyond words. Grandma, back in the comfort of her home, placed her hands once more on the familiar keys. She played softly, not for an audience, not for recognition, but for herself. Each note was a reflection of the day's experience, a celebration of courage, honesty, and the shared humanity that music could reveal. The room was filled with the gentle resonance of the piano, a quiet echo of the journey that had begun with a simple act of bravery and would continue to inspire those who had witnessed it for years to come. The day of the big concert arrived, and Grandma felt a mix of excitement and nervousness unlike anything she had experienced before. Her small, familiar piano at home had always been a safe space, a place where she could pour her emotions freely without worry or judgment. Now she would play on a grand stage, with a conductor whose opinion mattered greatly in an audience that was both vast and expectant. She took a deep breath, remembering the moments that had led her here. The quiet days of practice, the first meeting with the conductor, the second session where he had been genuinely moved. Each memory strengthened her resolve. Backstage, the atmosphere was alive with energy. Musicians tuned their instruments, stagehands moved quickly, and the hum of anticipation filled the air. Grandma, in her modest dress, was a stark contrast to the glimmering surroundings, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. She adjusted the piano bench, feeling the familiar texture of the keys under her fingertips, and allowed herself a small moment of calm. Music had always been her refuge, and she knew that whatever happened, the truth of her playing would resonate. The conductor approached her, his expression a mix of respect and awe. He had not anticipated how deeply her music would touch him in the past sessions, and the thought of hearing her perform for an entire hall filled him with a sense of reverence. He spoke quietly, encouraging her to play from the heart, not from fear or expectation. Grandma nodded, her focus shifting inward, tuning out the grandeur and focusing solely on the music she had carried with her for decades. As the lights dimmed and the audience settled, Grandma sat at the piano. She allowed her fingers to hover lightly over the keys, feeling their weight and texture. Then slowly she began to play. The first notes were gentle, deliberate, and filled with emotion. They seemed to float through the hall, capturing the attention of everyone present. The conductor, who had once laughed at her, now watched with complete concentration, fully aware of the power in her hands. Grandma's playing began to tell stories. She played melodies of joy, reflecting moments of happiness and celebration from her life. The audience felt the warmth in each note, sensing the depth of feeling that came from genuine experience rather than polished technique alone. Then she shifted to more contemplative pieces, the keys resonating with memories of loss, hardship, and resilience. Each note seemed to carry a fragment of her soul, and the hall was filled with a quiet intensity that was almost tangible. The conductor's eyes glistened as he listened. He had led orchestras across the world, yet he had rarely encountered such raw, unfiltered emotion in a performance. He was used to technical precision, flawless execution, and trained skill, but here was something different, something that no amount of training could teach. Grandma's music spoke to the human experience, transcending age, skill level, and expectations. He felt a lump in his throat, moved not only by the music but by the life story it carried. As the performance continued, Grandma's fingers danced across the keys with grace and purpose. She played a piece she had composed in her early years, inspired by a period of uncertainty and self-discovery. The melody was intricate yet flowing, carrying a sense of vulnerability and strength intertwined. The audience was captivated, leaning forward in their seats, their eyes reflecting the emotions that the music stirred within them. They could feel the journey she had taken, the trials she had overcome, and the resilience that had shaped her. Grandma did not notice the tears forming in some of the listeners' eyes. She played not for their reaction but for the music itself, letting it guide her hands and her heart. Every chord, every pause, every gentle trill was deliberate, a reflection of the life she had lived and the emotions she had gathered along the way. The hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for each note, absorbing the depth of feeling that poured from her. The conductor, usually composed and commanding, was visibly affected. He had approached music with a critical eye for so long that he had forgotten how to simply listen, to feel, to be moved. But Grandma's playing stripped away his defenses, reminding him of why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. He felt an overwhelming mix of respect, admiration, and humility. This was more than a performance. It was a revelation. Grandma then transitioned to a new composition, one that reflected her reflections on life's fleeting moments. It was gentle, almost whispering, yet carried an undeniable emotional weight. The music conveyed a sense of peace, acceptance, and the beauty of memories held close to the heart. The audience, caught in the spell of the melody, felt a collective hush, each person connecting with the music in a deeply personal way. The notes seemed to linger, resonating not only in the hall but within the hearts of those listening. As she played, the conductor could feel the tears running down his cheeks. He tried to maintain composure, but the sheer honesty and emotion in her music made it impossible. He realized that he had underestimated her not once but repeatedly. Her age, appearance, and unassuming demeanor had led him to doubt her, yet she had revealed a depth and mastery of emotion that left him speechless. He had laughed at her at first, and now he was confronted with the profound truth that music's power lay not in appearances or technical skill alone, but in the heart and soul behind it. Grandma's performance reached its climax, a combination of joy, sorrow, reflection, and hope, woven seamlessly into a tapestry of sound. The audience sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the journey she had guided them through. Each note was a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, the beauty of lived experience, and the unspoken connections that music could forge between people. The conductor felt a sense of humility and awe he had rarely experienced, realizing that he was in the presence of something extraordinary. When the final note faded, the hall remained silent, as if no one could find the words to express the impact of what they had just witnessed. The conductor, his hands trembling slightly, took a step forward and approached Grandma. His voice, when he finally spoke, was filled with genuine emotion. He told her that he had never experienced anything like this, that her music had touched him in ways he could not describe, and that he had been deeply wrong to underestimate her. Tears streamed down his face, an outward expression of the profound effect her performance had on him. Grandma listened quietly, her face calm and serene. She had not sought fame, recognition, or approval. She had simply played from the heart, sharing the music that had sustained her through a lifetime. Yet the acknowledgement from someone she had once feared judgment from brought a sense of fulfillment and quiet joy. She understood that her music had connected with others, transcending expectations and touching hearts in a way that few performances ever could. The audience erupted into applause, some standing, some wiping away tears, all deeply moved by the performance. It was more than just music. It was a testament to life, resilience, and the power of genuine expression. People spoke of the emotions they had felt, the memories that had surfaced, and the sense of wonder that the performance had inspired. Grandma, with her gentle smile and humble demeanor, acknowledged the appreciation, knowing that the real reward was the shared experience itself. After the concert, the conductor invited Grandma to join him on stage. The applause grew even louder as the audience recognized the significance of the moment. Here was a woman who had been laughed at, doubted, and underestimated, now standing as a symbol of authenticity, courage, and the timeless power of music. The conductor spoke once more, praising her skill, her emotional depth, and the life experience that had infused her playing with such profound beauty. He expressed gratitude, humility, and respect, acknowledging that he had learned something invaluable from her performance. Grandma's heart swelled with a quiet pride. She had faced her fears, shared her music, and moved not only the audience but the conductor himself. The journey from a small, quiet town to the grand stage had been transformative, not because of fame or recognition, but because of the power of music to convey truth and emotion. She had reminded everyone present, including herself, that age, appearance, or societal expectations could never diminish the impact of authentic expression. As the audience slowly departed, many approached her to share personal stories of how her music had touched them. People spoke of memories awakened, emotions stirred, and hope rekindled. Grandma listened patiently, offering gentle smiles and kind words, understanding that the true beauty of her performance lay not in applause, but in the connections it had forged. Music had created a bridge between lives, generations, and experiences, and she had been the instrument through which it flowed. The conductor lingered backstage, replaying the performance in his mind. He had entered the experience with skepticism and a sense of authority, yet he left humbled and inspired. He realized that his career had taught him many things about technique, precision, and discipline, but he had forgotten the core of music, its ability to touch hearts, evoke emotions, and communicate the inexpressible. Grandma had reminded him of this truth, leaving an indelible mark on his understanding of art and life. Grandma returned home that evening. The quiet of her living room, a comforting contrast to the grandeur of the stage. She sat at her piano, her fingers gently resting on the keys. She began to play softly, letting the notes flow freely, a personal reflection on the day's events. Each chord carried memories of the performance, the audience, and the conductor's emotional response. She played not for recognition or validation, but for the pure joy and release that music had always brought her. The room filled with gentle, resonant sound, a reminder that her journey was ongoing and that the power of authentic expression could continue to touch hearts in countless ways. After the concert, the town buzzed with stories about Grandma's performance. People spoke in hushed, awed tones about the depth of emotion she had brought to the stage. Her story spread quickly, not because of her age, but because of the power of her music to move people beyond words. She had reminded everyone that true talent was more than skill or fame. It was heart, life experience, and the courage to share one's soul. The news reached beyond the town, and soon, invitations and letters began arriving from people who had heard of her performance, all wishing to connect with the woman who had touched hearts so profoundly. Grandma, however, remained humble. She returned to her small home, the comfort of familiar surroundings welcoming her. Her piano sat in the corner, its worn keys inviting her to play, to express without expectation or judgment. That night she sat down and played softly, letting her fingers explore melodies that reflected the day's events, the faces of the audience, and the conductor's reaction. Each note was a quiet celebration of the journey she had taken and the connections she had made. She did not need accolades. The music itself was the reward. The conductor, too, was deeply changed by the experience. He had entered the performance with skepticism, confident in his judgment and perhaps a touch of arrogance. He had laughed at the thought of an elderly woman performing for him, expecting something quaint and unremarkable. Yet what he had heard went beyond technical skill or formal training. It was life distilled into sound, raw and unfiltered. He could feel her memories, her joys, her losses, and her triumphs in every note. It was a revelation that left him humbled and inspired. Unable to let the experience go, the conductor decided to visit Grandma personally. He wanted to understand her process, her history, and how she had cultivated such a deep emotional connection to music over the years. When he arrived at her home, he found her tending to her garden, her hands gently brushing soil and plants. She looked up and smiled, welcoming him with a quiet warmth that contrasted with the grandeur of the concert hall. He realized immediately that her presence was as genuine as her music, unpretentious and filled with quiet dignity. They sat together at her piano and the conductor listened as she played, not performing but simply allowing the music to flow. He asked questions gently, curious about her life, her inspirations, and her relationship with music. She spoke softly, sharing stories of her youth, the people she had loved, the challenges she had faced, and the solace she had always found in the piano. Every story was intertwined with her music, revealing how deeply her life experiences had shaped her artistry. The conductor felt a profound respect for her, recognizing that her mastery was not in technique alone, but in the authenticity and emotion she poured into each note. Over time, the conductor began inviting Grandma to perform at special events, smaller gatherings at first, so that she could share her music with those who would truly appreciate it. She was hesitant initially, preferring the privacy of her home, but she recognized the joy her music brought to others and agreed. Each performance was different, reflecting her mood, the moment, and the lives she touched. She remained humble, never seeking the spotlight, but her presence brought an undeniable magic to every gathering. Word spread that Grandma's performances were unlike any other. People traveled from far and wide to hear her play, drawn not only by curiosity but by the promise of experiencing something profound. Those who attended often left transformed, carrying with them the emotions and stories her music conveyed. They spoke of feeling memories they had thought long forgotten, of experiencing a deep connection to life and humanity that few performances could evoke. Grandma became a quiet legend, her reputation built not on fame or accolades, but on the power of her music to move hearts. The conductor continued to support her, providing opportunities and guidance while never imposing his expectations. He understood that her music was deeply personal, and that its strength lay in its authenticity. He marveled at how a woman, whose life had been filled with ordinary routines and quiet struggles, could convey such extraordinary emotion. Her music reminded him and everyone who heard it that true artistry comes from living fully and sharing that experience with others. As the years passed, Grandma's influence grew. She inspired young musicians not through instruction alone but through example. They saw that skill could be learned, but emotion, heart, and life experience could not. She showed that music was a language that transcended age, culture, and circumstance, and that the courage to share it honestly could touch lives in ways that fame never could. The young ones who listened to her often spoke of feeling a profound sense of connection, of understanding what it meant to express one's life through sound. Grandma continued her quiet life, balancing the attention she received with the simplicity she loved. She played for herself, for her neighbors, and occasionally for larger audiences, always maintaining the authenticity that had made her music so powerful. She never sought the recognition or accolades that naturally came her way. Instead, she found joy in the process, in the sharing, and in the subtle but profound impact her music had on the world around her. One day, many years later, the conductor returned to visit her, carrying a sense of reverence and gratitude. He told her that her music had changed his life, not only as a conductor but as a human being. He had learned to listen more deeply, to appreciate the stories behind the notes, and to honor the connection that music could create. He expressed that meeting her had reminded him of the essence of music, which lay not in perfection or technique alone, but in the heart and soul that shaped each sound. Grandma listened, her gentle smile reflecting both humility and satisfaction. She understood that her journey had always been about more than performance. It had been about living fully, embracing life's joys and sorrows and allowing that depth to shine through in her music. Her story was not about age or recognition, but about courage, authenticity, and the quiet power of expression. And in sharing her music, she had reminded the world of the beauty and strength inherent in living a life true to oneself. As she played one evening in her small home, the sunset casting warm light across the room, she reflected on the journey she had taken, From the quiet days of practice to the grand stage, she had learned that music could transcend expectations, heal wounds, and unite people in ways words never could. Each note she played was a reminder of the connections she had forged, the lives she had touched, and the courage it had taken to share her heart through sound. In those moments, she felt a profound peace. Her music had reached beyond herself, beyond the limits of time and place, touching hearts and inspiring others to embrace their own gifts, regardless of age or circumstance. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and the fear of judgment, yet she had triumphed not through competition or acclaim, but through the simple, honest act of sharing her soul through music. Grandma's story, and the music that carried it, became a symbol of hope, inspiration, and the enduring power of authenticity. People remembered her not only as a talented musician, but as a woman who had shown that courage, passion, and honesty could overcome doubt and transform lives. And long after the applause faded, her melodies continued to echo, a timeless testament to the beauty of living fully and expressing oneself with truth and heart.